What's up, guys? I'm Chad Barnes, and welcome to the channel. Here, it's all about real car talk, from simple fixes to smart driving tips and keeping your ride in top shape. If that sounds good to you, go ahead and give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button and make sure you watch all the way through. There's a lot of good stuff coming. Let's get to it.
In the 2000 years, crossovers began to make money extremely actively for those who produced them, and Mazda was in business, releasing first the CX-7 and then the CX-5. The new model launched off the bat, becoming quite popular. The compact CX-5, in which they put the maximum of both design and technology, debuted in late 2011, and Russia became one of the first countries to receive commercial vehicles in early 2012. And by the end of the same year, the crossover was localized at the Mazda plant in Vladivostok. Prices at the start of sales were extremely humane by today's standards. For the car with a basic 2-liter gasoline engine, front-wheel drive and manual asked a little more than 900,000 rubles, and the top version was estimated at 1.4 million. By the light restyling of 2015, prices went up. The car was estimated at 1.2 to 1.7 million rubles. Well, and on the eve of the change of generations, the basic version already cost more than 1.5 million, and the richest was approaching 2. Actually, this partly explains such high prices for fresh cars, although the oldest ones are now asked for almost as much as they cost new. Let's take a look at how much they have lost in quality without losing in price. Despite the fact that the age of the earliest cars is already approaching 10 years, there are no serious problems with the body. This is partly the merit of the owners, partly galvanization and even thin, but decent painting. Practically all defects are typical operational ones, like repainted from chips hood, defects on the windshield frame and incipient corrosion of sills in the area behind the front wheels. Plastic arch linings store dirt and trap moisture, so there may be pockets of rust in the inner cavity. The arches can also be damp, and even though it's far from a major problem, it's worth looking in the visible corners. A common defect is corrosion in the luggage door opening, which rubs the paint with the seal. Clicking doorstops are also a minor and typical problem worth keeping in mind when inspecting. But overall, the condition of the cars is usually spiffy, and visible pockets of corrosion are usually indicative of a post-accident restoration. All the more so because there is a sense in restoration. The prices for body parts are quite good. Original parts are expensive, of course, but there is a range of non-original parts, and for additional savings you can always turn to dismantling shops. But someone can do without them. For example, a new front bumper can be bought for 14 to 19,000, and the hood for 12 to 20,000, while the original ones cost 30. On the wing you can save threefold. Non-original starts from 4,000. But the cost of the windshield strongly depends on the presence of heating. If you can buy an ordinary one for 9 to 12,000, the fully heated one will cost already 30,000 even for non-original. A similar situation with optics. Usual halogen headlights are available non-original at a price from 12,000 at the price of firm in 30. But here xenon or diode headlights, which appeared after restyling, are available only in the original version and cost 70 to 80,000. 4 a piece, and even more expensive, so they will certainly have to be found on the dismantling. Mazda CX-5 received a new common platform, which then formed the basis of the 3 and 6, although the principal schemes of suspensions were already familiar. McPherson up front and multi-lever at the rear. Maintenance and repair are quite inexpensive, if we take into account the range of non-original spare parts, although the initial repairability is not ideal. For example, front ball bearings are pressed into the levers, and the rear silent block of the front L-shaped lever is normally changed, together with the lever itself. Of course, there are on sale and repair ball mounts from 600 rubles, and the rear silent block, as an assembly, and separately for repressing. However, it is also quite possible to buy the whole lever. A few non-original ones cost 5 to 8,000 rubles, which is cheaper than 14 to 18 for the original. There are no surprisingly expensive elements in the rear multi-lever too, practically for all levers, including a large longitudinal. 1. It is possible to buy analogues for reasonable money. And you can do without replacing the silent blocks and bushings, which are also offered in a wide range. In general, the question here, as it often happens, is not the price of spare parts, but the amount of work, and it is worth considering when inspecting the machine. Well, consumables like stabilizer struts are traditionally cheap. Despite the bright appearance and motors up to 2.5 liters, Brakes here are absolutely ordinary, single-piston disc brakes with a floating bracket around the circle. However, the diameter of front discs in 297mm is decent, and most owners have enough brakes both on deceleration and on resource. Consumables are inexpensive. The front disc can be bought literally from 1.5 to 2,000 at the price of the original in 7 to 8, and the rear disc with a diameter of 303mm, in general from 1,000 rubles. At purchase, it remains only to check the condition of calipers, lines, and cables of a parking brake, that if necessary to bargain a little. And here in the presence of problems with the electric power steering to bargain is more serious. The price tag of a new complete 6-figure, so you will have to look for specialists in repair. But the mechanical rack itself is cheap. Let the original costs 50,000, but you can buy a non-original one for 10 to 20. The all-wheel drive scheme of the CX-5 is absolutely typical for crossovers. Electromagnetic multidisc clutch transfers part of the power to the rear axle when the front wheels slip. Accordingly, at purchase it is necessary to check the transfer case, more precisely, an angular reducer, on the subject of oil cleanliness, absence of leaks and silence of work, and also cardons and actually a clutch, signs of which malfunction will be jerks and twitches. At connection of a back axis. Clutch failure is not a verdict. It can be reassembled, but it is a good reason for bargaining in any case. By the way, many versions of CX-5 were front-wheel drive, and they bought them quite willingly, the share of mono-wheel drive cars. On the secondary market is about 40%, so there is an opportunity to save on future maintenance and repair. The Japanese did not make any wisecracks with gearboxes. Unlike many compatriots, they did not experiment with variators and offered a classic hydro-mechanical automatic in addition to the automatic transmission. 6-speed mechanics, offered as a basic option for the gasoline engine, did not gain much popularity at the time of writing the material. In the sale on Avito, the share of cars with automatic transmission was less than 5%. However, this is not its fault. The box itself has a typical resource of more than 200,000 kilometers and has no inherent flaws. Except that the clutch set is expensive, about 20,000 for Luke and even more for the original set. However, the low popularity of the manual transmission is due not only to the wealth of buyers, but also to the success of automatics. The 6-speed gearbox with index FW6A, GW6A in the reinforced version for diesel cars, turned out to be quite reliable, not throwing surprises up to 150 and more thousand kilometers. Needless to say, its resource is significantly dependent on maintenance. If you believe in oil for the whole life, then this period is just about 150,000 kilometers. But replacement every 50,000 with filter change and heat exchanger cleaning can prolong the life of the box up to 200 to 250,000. Certainly, not all owners were concerned about it, but many people like to drive actively, so now it is not necessary to hope for a miracle. Diagnostics and test drive are necessarily, as well as checking of oil condition, but there is even a dipstick. The situation with the engines is also quite decent, although at the time of their introduction the units of the new Skyactiv family were something quite unusual. Their unified compression ratio of 14:1 was too high for a gasoline engine and too low for a diesel, which frightened the adherents of the old units of the MZR family. In practice, however, the Skyactiv engines have turned out to be not so scary. Of course, they like quality fuel and good service, but they did not have congenital defects, reducing the resource. Besides, the Russian market was paid attention not only by localization. The initial 2-liter PVPS petrol motor was defortified from 165 to 150 horsepower in order to save on taxes. The older 2.5-liter PYVPS produces 192 horsepower. Of their common features can be noted except for the tendency to oil consumption. The amount of consumption is usually not critical, but still surprised owners in the first years. Direct injection reminds about itself by the price of the fuel injector in 35 to 45,000 rubles, although injectors are not so expensive. About 10,000 per unit. The diesel motor also usually reminds about itself only typical age-related problems. Fuel injector, injectors, clogging EGR, which, due to low compression ratio, is more important than for classic diesels. Besides, there is a double supercharger, so even a restored unit with 2 snails will cost 70 to 100,000. As a whole, the motor is quite good, but in our country it is still extremely unpopular. On the secondary market of diesel cars less than 5% of the total volume. So, thinking to buy diesel CX-5, you will have to be patient. But for those who are not after diesel, it will be quite easy. From the brief review above it becomes clear that obviously unsuccessful. Versions of the CX-5 actually do not have. Therefore, you can choose a car based on your own wishes for power, type of drive and equipment. Well, and the most logical choice will be a crossover in the age up to 5 years from the first owner, equipped with a full drive. An automatic and 2-liter motor, about like this, and if the data from Autotica about the honesty of mileage and accident-free history will be supported by good results of diagnostics, then a few more problem-free years after the purchase are ensured. In conclusion, the Mazda CX-5 I, priced at 1.8 million rubles, presents a compelling option for those seeking a blend of luxury, reliability, and performance. Its popularity speaks volumes about its appeal, and the minimal issues reported by owners further enhance its attractiveness. However, potential buyers should weigh their budget against the features and benefits offered. Ultimately, if you value a well-rounded vehicle that delivers on both style and substance, investing in the Mazda CX-5 I could be a decision worth making.